Okay. I go by she, her, and I'll only be accepting verbal POIs, and I'll try my best to do so around the 6 minute mark. Okay, starting in three, two, one. So, before we get into why we believe living in the altered carbon universe is a very beneficial thing, firstly, let's frame what the world looks like. What exactly does the altered carbon universe looks like, right? It looks like, well, obviously in the info slide, people's identities and consciousness are saved in digital disk, and they can just essentially continue on to reincarnate with their consciousness being transferred into another body so they can continue living. So it looks like people having just infinite lives and being able to constantly revive. And also looks like your loved ones will never die and everyone will be able to live together happily. Now, this is what our world looks like, right? However, what does opposition world looks like? It looks like hopefully they believe in reincarnation because we believe that opposition world will probably look like reincarnation, but you're just living without your past life memories. Like you could be a white person in this life, you could be a black person in the other life, and you don't even remember your past life. And these past life memories include your happy moments. It includes your trauma, right? It includes every single thing that you have went through since the moment you were born, and you will just forget every single thing that you have ever experienced in opposition's world. And in opposition's world, you can be inserted into any other body, right? It could be a black person, it could be a white person. And in our world, you can also be inserted into any other body, like an old person, a child, an adult, and etc. etc. But however, the difference is that we will be able to remember every single experience and every single memory that we've ever experienced. So we believe that the technology in this altered carbon universe is accessible to everyone, as in everyone on Earth will be able to continue living and continue reincarnating even after they die. So people in this altered universe might or might not procreate, but we just believe that it doesn't matter in this debate at all. Now, moving on to the arguments after all the framing, right? This brings us on to the first argument why this altered carbon universe is tantamount to immortality and why it is extremely beneficial. So we believe that in this world, the capacity to access happiness is endless. Three layers to this. Firstly, you can try out different things. It includes like your hobbies, your families, the things that you want, right? You can just try out a lot of different things. Like maybe in this life you didn't try out this very good Italian dish. In the second life, you could try that out. Second layer is that you have more time. And more time is very important because you can try out a lot of different living experiences, right? You won't be afraid to die when you're like 20 because you know that you can reincarnate. So you will have more time to do a lot of things. And thirdly, you can try out different living experiences. You can be born in different countries, you can enjoy different things. For example, in one life, you might be rich. In second life, you could try being poor so you understand what they're going through and you could help them in the future. And it looks like people just being more willing to take risks instead of like staying in their own tiny little bubble and never experiencing the real world because maybe they're afraid of death. And people aren't afraid to die, so they are willing to go to greater lengths to improve themselves and experience new things. This is also very important because you can make up to whatever you did in the past. This is why immortality is extremely important. It looks like being able to testify to murders, right? Victims themselves can testify and get closure from exposing their killer because while you're reincarnating, you still remember who killed you and you can testify to that. And regrets just essentially do not exist because you can make up to whatever you did in your previous life. In opposition's world, maybe you might some very famous cases of like regrets would be like you might not have time to say sorry or I love you to someone you care about before you die because like deaths are unexpected. It could happen anytime, anywhere. In our world, this wouldn't happen. There would be no regrets. You can live well because if you do have regrets in one life, you're already reincarnating with all your memories. You could just say sorry to that person because you're already alive again. You have your memories. You won't just die and never remember anything and be and have regrets, right? It also looks like immortality. It looks like humanity flourishing. Why? Because you can accumulate experiences, right? It looks like becoming wiser and wiser and slowly gaining a lot more wisdom. The process will be very fulfilling, and it looks like finding the meaning of life and how you can improve the lives of many and how you can make an impact on the world because you have all your memories, right? Now, on to why immortality is very important and how it brings social impacts is that it allows innovation to spur and expound. On our side, we are essentially removing the physical limitations of a human being. For example, scientists come up with a lot of groundbreaking stuff that is important to us as humanity, right? We have like Stephen Hawking who died from ALS, right? We have Einstein, we have Thomas Edison who just died more naturally. But on a comparative, these people already contribute a lot, right? But they're constrained a lot on opposition. There's a lot of arbitrary factors that strip away their lives We have time being a limiting factor. We have them maybe dying at 70 years old. Or we have diseases like Stephen Hawking. It just decreases their capacity to innovate on operations world and their capacity to continue contributing to humanity because they're just very constrained because they are unable to reincarnate with their memories. Right? On our side, because of the wisdom they have accumulated through many years, it will be very beneficial to innovation. For example, we have Isaac Newton observing a falling apple and realizing the theory of gravity, right? If maybe Isaac Newton lived for more years, if he lived for maybe hundreds of years, he could have observed more things. He could bring out more innovations, more ideas through all the lives he has lived and all he has observed, right? So why is this very important? This brings us innovation, this brings us groundbreaking technology, and it will uplift the lives of thousands, millions, even billions, right? We have physics, we have chemistry, we have bioengineering. All of these will be able to be innovated. We have green technology, we can solve global warming, we have space tech, maybe we can go to other planets and don't have to just live on Earth, right? But before moving on, is there any POI? 3, 2, 1. No, all right. So we believe that we will have a lot of groundbreaking technology, right? We have like space tech, we have green tech, we have just a lot of innovations and ideas coming out because people have lived a much longer life. And people who are geniuses like Stephen Hawking will not have a shorter life in comparison to on opposition side where his life was ended because of ALS. But on our side, he will be able to reincarnate, right? This brings us endless amounts of benefits. The lives of humanity as a whole will be improved. We have important people like Martin Luther King. He could continue to push for racial equality. He wouldn't have died. He would be able to just reincarnate and continue contributing to us, continue contributing to humanity as a whole. So what we believe today, what is our conclusion? Is that on our world, in this altered carbon universe, we have immortality. People might die, but they can just reincarnate and they have their memory. So it is the same thing, and the capacity for happiness is endless. You can make up to whatever you did. There will be no regrets. Humanity will flourish because everyone has different experiences, and they will be able to relate to each other because they could just reincarnate and they would have a different body, and they would be able to better relate to each other because they all have lived similar lives. And also, innovation and creativity will be able to be spurred, will be able to expand humongously, and humanity as a whole will be able to improve. And that is why we are very proud to propose. Thank you.
We thank the Prime Minister for that fine speech. To open opposition side of the House, we call upon the Leader of the Opposition. Here.
Hello. I go by he, him pronouns, and if you guys have any POIs, please give them to me verbally. Thank you. All right. If everyone's ready, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. If I had infinite time, I no longer would chase my dreams. I would no longer have a single care for my problems. Why? Because I can always get to the next issue tomorrow. We think to live forever is a curse. We think life is only beautiful because we value it. We're very proud to oppose. I'm going to be doing a couple of things. First, on our team stance. Second, on a couple of rebuttals from my previous speaker. And then we're going to explain 2 substantive arguments in my speech. First, on how you lead to the loss of respect of human life under their side of the house. And second argument on how you get more environmental and societal harms overall. Before all of that though, stance. First, we would definitely reject any offers to live in like such a universe where our bodies can just be constantly replaced and we can live forever, right? But second, an important framing to understand is presumably all the problems that applies to our current world will still be existent, right? Things like overpopulation, things like lack of resources, rich versus poor, disparity gap issues. All of that will still exist under their side of the house, no matter who can access this technology. A little bit more about that in my argument. So going straight on to rebuttals then, they tell you a couple of interesting points. First thing they tell you is that happiness is endless. 2 responses. First, that is wrong, because at the point in which you pass this motion and you live in such a world, we need to understand that time becomes relative, right? Maybe 100 years is long in our world, that might just be seconds in theirs. In that world, happiness isn't endless because at some point you probably can't experience everything because of how long you're able to live, right? Time is relative. Second, if you're living in a cramped world and you're suffocating because so many people are here, I don't think I would be very happy myself, neither would you, right? The second thing they tell you is that victims can now expose the killer as a side benefit of the CJS system. 2 things. First, if this is the thing, a victim now has ultimate power. That means the victim can just lie and say whoever, and the public would just believe them, right? We think CJS becomes very, very screwed. Second, even if you can point out the killer probably won't get a proportional amount of punishment, because recognize the killer probably can also live forever too. Presumably, under their side of the house, because of the analysis they can provide you on OG, that anyone has access to the technology, right? So at the end of the day, the killer can also live forever. I don't see any proportional punishments here. Second thing to tell you is that they get more innovation because geniuses will live forever. Innovation becomes stagnant because there's no more motivation to achieve anything, right? We don't need to be happy today. We can just be happy tomorrow if you buy their analysis. We don't need to live in a better world today because we can always just develop tomorrow. We think innovation becomes stagnant because ultimately the drive to innovate is the race against time and deterioration. Time is no longer a factor under their side of the house. First argument then, on the loss of respect of human life. Premise, when life becomes just a price to pay, we think it leads to a lot of harms. I'm going to keep forwarding 2 layers here. First, you come to devalue your experiences and your life, right? The first thing to know is that we think experiences now become something that you really don't need to hold on to anymore. Memories just becomes like a dust in the sea, a single drop of water in the ocean. This means you're less likely to cherish those memories, those experiences that often defines what a human life looks like, often defines your personal life, right? But second, while immortality is an easy choice to make at the beginning, we think it becomes progressively harder to live with those consequences over time. First, your sense of immediacy will probably subside as will your desire to be involved in anything at all for yourself. I'll tell you a bit later. But second, all the pains will remain unsolved under their side of the house. Even if side proposition wants to tell you that you can presumably probably leave the world when you want to, we think there are people in place who will disallow you to, right? For example, your family, for example, your friends. We think that means all of your pain will continuously be stuck with you forever. I don't think that just assuming that your happiness will outweigh your pain is necessarily a good mechanism under side proposition. Second layer though, violence is more likely to happen, right? Because the moment in which you begin to devalue the purpose and sense of life, you are also no longer conscious to the damages to the body. Why? Because when you die, the presumption is that you can always be transferred into another body, right? Even under their side of the house, right? They tell you how soldiers can become more brave. So when that becomes a prevalent social narrative push, we think you're much more likely to think of violent acts and those experiences that inflict physical harm as something that isn't as important or shouldn't be considered as impactful. Understand this is about the comparative. First, under their side, war and the usage of troops, active soldiers, becomes far more likely insofar as there is a chance that troops can be revived, more conflict, less compromise. But second, this means that compromises no longer become a necessary action to take, because you can be in a standoff for virtually forever, be in a war forever, because you can always replace your troops, right? Under our side, we think our actions before we go into the war is important because life is actually valued. The comparative is very clear. Our side is the only side that allows individuals to value the human life, which leads to better decision making in terms of thinking about whether we should compromise or whether we should keep fighting in the war. We don't want to put millions of other people in front of pain forever, right? Before I move into my second argument though, if there's a POI from the closing, I'll take that. All right, opening.
Okay, so given issues like global warming and overpopulation still exist in our side of the house, why is that not an incentive for innovation to occur?
Guys, global warming and population issues is going to be infinitely worse off under their side of the house, right? I don't think even if the geniuses of the world came together and thought about trying to help out global populations decreasing or trying to help out global warming, that you're just going to have to some kind of magically come up with a solution. I don't think that's how innovation works, right? I think in that case, you're going to have an even faster race against time. I don't think that's a very good case to run. Second argument then on environmental and societal harms. Premise, there will be clear harm from the exponential increases in global populations. First, let's talk about environmental issues. Because understand that the Earth cannot sustain this many people on the planet. If every person lived forever, the number of people on the planet would obviously increase dramatically. This is problematic for multiple reasons. We're already living in a world that's becoming far more under-resourced, right? Given that the population is massively under-resourced right now, it is not very likely that we would ever have enough things like clean water, enough infrastructure, for example, for everyone to thrive, or enough food to be able to sustain populations of that size. Impact. The ultimate problem then is that people are going to be fighting for resources. First, richer states will now be forced to take over poorer states for the space and resources. This is harmful towards individuals who don't have financial security, especially those minorities and those people that disenfranchised. Second, humans are naturally quite selfish. We think it's morally wrong to preference your continued existence over others in the future, but people will continue to hang on, consuming the world's resources without thought to future generations who also deserve the right to live in the same world we did, right? This means that the tragedy of the common happens at the greatest extent possible the moment the elite take control of all resources. Even if poor people live longer, because as OG tries to frame to you, everyone can have equal access, we say that the rich will just push them all to one cramped space with their financial power. At the end of the day, if you're born poor and you lose a birth lottery, you're going to live a miserable life under their side of the house. We think that's unfair. Second, widening rich and poor disparity gap. On a side prop, it's inevitable that this will happen, right? Because the poor probably won't have grant access to such technology. Why? Insofar as this sort of technology requires tremendous amounts of resources, development, and research, we don't think under their side of the house they can just claim the government fiat to say everyone has absolute access, right? We think if this technology does exist to some extent and you need to spend money on, like, for example, storing these human bodies, the rich will continue to exert their power and the poor will be virtually left with nothing and nowhere to go. What does this mean? First, this looks like corporation CEOs becoming infinitely more powerful since they're in control for virtually forever. Second, socioeconomic mobility is restricted under their side. Third, no chance for development of lower classes since it's now harder to break into the job market where presumably many don't die and keep their positions forever. So socioeconomic mobility is also lost in that sense. For these reasons, we're extremely proud to stand on OL.
We thank the LO for their fine speech. To continue opening government, we call upon the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
All right, I'm audible.
Loud and clear.
All right, I take POIs verbally. So if you have any POIs, please just unmute yourself. And yeah. All right, speech. All right, yeah. So speech starting in 3, 2, 1. 2 questions. Number 1, is immortality good? And second of all, is innovation likely to spark? And is the spark of innovation good? But before, just one line of rebuttal to what's the case in opening opposition. They say that wars are more likely to happen as a result of this because literally individuals want to fight war more as soldiers are likely to continue to be because like the supply of soldiers are likely to be unlimited. This is untrue to begin with. The factor is that each and every single one of these individual entities or each and every single one of these individual soldiers are likely to have rational calculuses to weigh whether or not they want to be a soldier. So the factor is that you cannot make a group of individuals to be a soldier forever. The factor is that the question here, it is unclear why these soldiers cannot just go against these oppressive structures that exist, but I'll suggest that in fact, these things are more likely to occur in our side of house, i.e. the allocation, the progression of change and the push towards things that, for example, to go against or to turn over an oppressive structure, for example, is more likely to exist in our side of house because individuals understand that it is not the fact that their life means nothing after that the fact that their lives actually mean nothing after the mortality on their side of the house. The factor is that a lot of times individuals are reluctant to go against these structures is because of the fact that they live in a tolerance of death, as in they want to preserve their lives to its greatest extent. The moment in which you remove the physical limitations in our side of house is the moment in which individuals are more likely to fight these structures, as in we suggest that these things are unlikely to occur in our side of house. But a second reason as why this is unlikely to occur is that if you have insurmountable amounts of time and etc., it is unclear as to why torturing other individuals or going to fight a war is something they're likely to do. The factor is that I don't think anyone likes to fight wars, the fact that they're long lasting, the fact that you have to witness individuals suffering, the fact that each and every single one of these individuals that we can suggest is that it is intuitive to believe that to some extent to have some level of capacity to empathize with the individuals, there is some capacity to sympathize. So even if there are some individuals starting fighting war in our side of health, we suggest they're likely to change longevity because that is not something fun to do. And the fact is that life is constructed by virtue of the fact that you have the ability to do fun things. That is exactly why even if you have like unlimited amount of soldiers, it is probably not an incentive for you to fight wars on our side. First question then is mortality good? PM explains 2 things. First, is that honey tells you that it maximizes your capacity to experience happiness. I want to add one thing, which is where the majority of the individuals filled up from the capacity to experience happiness in the status quo they're living on their side of house. I have 2 reasons right here, or I think 2 reasons right here. First, it is to suggest the arbitrariness of the birth lottery. This is that you're born in Somalia and therefore have to experience the greatest drought right now, which literally means things like, for example, famine, and you don't have the ability to connect to your family, for example, or even if you have the ability to stay with them, the fact that all the things you've experienced together atrocities means that you're removed from the capacity to formulate good memories with them. But second of all, if you're born as a racial minority on their side of house, for example, you're subjected to tons of discrimination. Literally your entire life, literally the society dictates your ability to do the things that you want. So all the things you want to do is significantly constrained on their side of the house. Or like, for example, you're born as an LGBTQ community, as an LGBTQ individual in a conservative on an autocratic state, for example, you're literally denied your capacity to love, your capacity to like somebody else which you like. We think all these things are highly constrained in a status quo to which they live in the world of the opposition. But the second reason right here is the arbitrariness of life in itself, i.e. life is something that's constructed by a very large proportion of luck. For example, if you cross the road, the probability of you being hit by a car probably is so random that in fact it might be 50-50. The factor is that if you get hit on your side of the house, then literally life is nothing else because you live in non-existence. But on our side of the house, at the very least, we're able to reincarnate. That is exactly why it's better. But second of all, for example, if you study so hard, literally, but unfortunately, the day before the exams, and you suddenly got sick, for example, literally your exam is screwed. So all your hard work have gone to waste on their side of the house. So the very least, on our side of the house, you still have the propensity to retaliate back. But how is this going to happen, right? We suggest you're likely to do the things they would like and to pursue your hobbies, for example, which brings you insurmountable amount of happiness. It perhaps can be literally just sitting at just going out with your friends after school and drinking and going to Starbucks, for example, or to do the things which you like with a friend, or try out new things, for example. Their response was, oh, you have no urgency to experience life. That is, and sooner or later or not, your happiness will end somehow. But I think this is not true, right? The factor is that previously we don't have phones, so our ancestors are doing doing random things and like boring stuff altogether. But right now, because we have phones, then like phones are fun, for example. So the point here is that there's always new things which you can explore as the era progresses, and there will be new nuances towards your life. To which, for example, if previously we don't have planes, but now we have planes, so we can fly the world, but previously they cannot. So the point here is that there is always futuristic examples that we can utilize right here to prove the capacity for humanity to progress. And as humanity progresses, that is exactly why you're likely to have more and more avenues for you to experience and to maximize the ability of your life. The last thing in this issue then is why is this actually important? It's because understanding status quo, this is oftentimes unequal. You're born in an unfortunate situation. No one is there to help you. The only way you have is to work your heart, is work your ass up the social ladder. And that is what the only thing society can tell you. What do we do in opening government is that we equalize the ultimate playing field right here, is that we offer the opportunity to which each and every one of these individuals on the ground, that even if your life currently sucks, there's still a propensity for things to change in the future that offers hope insurmountably to a lot of the individuals on the ground who are currently living in the destitution and the sufferings of life. We think we better these individuals. But second, that is exactly why immortality in itself is incrementally important in this debate. And that is why it offers a lot of individuals that ultimately maximizes the meaning of life towards the individuals. You're unlikely to be stagnant as what closing opposition might bring up or opening opposition might talk about later. It's just the fact that even if you're stagnant, you'll come to a point which you realize that if you continue to be stagnant, you're just wasting time and you're not going to do anything that you're able to experience happiness. So we can see perhaps you might be stagnant to some extent on our side of health, but in longevity, you're still going to do things that you want in the very end that maximizes your life towards meaning. Before I move on, I'll take that POI.
If you're a minority, that doesn't mean you get better results on your side, because on relativity, the majority will increase, the conservative will increase with you probably more exponentially.
Yeah, so the nuance here is that on their side of house, because you're a minority, your life is screwed up. But on our side of house, if you're a minority in the current body or a minority in the present, to the very least, you might be allocated into a majority body in the future. That is why things are likely to change on our side of house. The second thing right here is the capacity to make up to regrets. Perhaps it is the fact that your parents died when you're young, so you don't have the capacity to be filial to them. But on our side of house, these things can exist because your life is unlimited. The fact that you would thank your parents and you want to express your gratitude towards them, or to express your gratitude towards your debate coach, for example, we suggest all these things can happen in our side of house because you have an expanded capacity to do these things. You have more capacity to do these because you have more time, because you have more resources, because you have more things to be allocated to be able to express the things that you want. That is exactly why you're unlikely to be regretful on our side of house. And this is important because being regret ultimately removes your capacity to be happy. The factor is that even if your life is benevolent, one thing that you regret in your life, you're likely to amplify to such a good extent where it triumphs other things. The second question, therefore, in his speech, which literally no, it's 7, but whatever in terms of innovation, literally this is very important, and there's no response coming from opening opposition rather, right? So the point here, this is very important because it uplifts the life of the entirety of humanity. They say there's no incentive to innovate, but we suggest issues like global warming, for example, that affect the ability for humanity to continue to exist, probably is an incentive for you to continue to innovate. And these issues are likely to be better because things that, for example, you can have water, you can like build houses underwater, you can do things that, for example, to have better houses to like expand lands, for example, or to go to outer space, for example, even if the earth is like overpopulated. That's exactly why innovation is incremental in the earth that it has, and can only exist in a world where your physical limitations are removed. For these reasons, we're still proud to propose for one last time.
We thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that fine speech. Now we call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Am I audible?
Loud and clear.
Go by he, him pronouns, and I will take verbal POIs. If everyone's ready, I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. What the proposition team is proposing in today's debate of living in this altered carbon universe is actually a dystopian movie plot. Individuals no longer value life. The planet becomes overpopulated exponentially, which leads to only the top elite of the elite being able to access basic necessities. Because every single social and economic problems we have currently on Earth will be exponentially worse in this new altered carbon universe, we are so proud to oppose. I'm going to be doing 3 things in my speech today. First, I'm going to rebut to some of the points that were brought up by by OG and tell you why they didn't stand. 2, team extension, and 3, tell you why each OO that brought the most important contribution to today's debate. Moving on to rebuttal, right? The DPM tells us that everyone can live forever, so minorities can fight back to structural issues more effectively on their side. But we tell you that this is absolutely not the case. When majorities can live forever and hold their discriminatory values while staying in the power of society, minorities have absolutely zero chance to fight against discrimination because the majority can establish their power forever, right? But also, mathematically, 100 to the power of 2 is a lot more detrimental than 2 to the power of 2, right? That's their side of the house, and their minority will be minorities, and they will have even less representation in society as years go by, right? Then the DPM tells us that you can get hit by cars on our side of the house, which is why we need to live in this carbon universe. This debate, let me clarify, is not about debate about which side can solve every single small issues in the world. We say that this is not a valid reason to perform to billions of people and disintegrate the entire world for one small problem of getting hit by a car, right? This debate is about which side is relatively better compared to each side. And we tell you that it's our side of the house that's relatively better. Then the DPM gives us this really ridiculous claim saying that you can just switch races under their side of the house so you can become the majority guy. Right, but guys, then who in the world is going to care about solving like racial issues and discriminatory structural problems if you can just become a different race, right? That means that other minority issues, like LGBTQ issues, like which you can't just turn straight when you're gay, are hurt because overall social justice is going to be less prevalent, right? Because of things like in terms of race, people are just going to switch and just become white if they can, like DPM proposed. The reason why OG is out of this debate is insofar as they just ignore like 80% of the arguments my previous speakers provided to, in terms of things like rich versus the poor, loss of socioeconomic mobility, lack of happiness, lack of resources, and the loss of the environment, right? Now, keep quickly moving on to extension. Let me prove to you why society will become extremely dysfunctional, where progress is stalled, and how society becomes greatly disproportionate as well, and how it hurts actual minorities much more under their surveillance. Proposition had a very shallow and idealistic thought to what will happen when you have unlimited time, and said how more time will lead to more innovation, right? However, what both of the speakers in the OG failed to understand was that the lack of time is what leads to more innovation. In society where no person feels the need to work hard because they don't need to amass wealth quickly, society becomes very stagnant. The mechanism is that feeling of I can do it later will collectively paralyze the overall economy and society, right? The reason why people feel excited to wake up every single morning to work hard and make each day count to make their dreams come true is this idea of urgency. The fact that they want to die one day and that they want to accomplish things and leave a legacy in society before they die. This is completely gone under their side. So another major harm and impact that comes with team proposition is the fact that young people that want to be successful are going to be hit by a glass ceiling of age that will almost certainly exist, right? Old people will continue to hold the top leadership positions for far longer, not allowing the next generation to come through to drive society and make progress, right? This is inevitable as the older people who have lived for hundreds and hundreds of years simply have more experience and skill, and since they're not retiring or dying, they're not stepping up for their positions in society. The new generation that comes then has absolutely no chance of gaining influential roles in society. And what's going to happen on the other side is going to have access to like low-wage jobs, even if they have worked extremely hard. Because let me tell you realistically, 20 years of grinding and working hard simply cannot compete with someone who has lived for 200 years of life and who's already holding this position in power. This means that the conservative ideas will also, right? No, thank you. Let me take it later. Another harmful idea is that this will also stop social and economic innovation. As the next generation needs to have the ability to constantly question social norms and take technology into a new direction like we have on Earth. Moreover, this could quite possibly create a new social order based exclusively on age, where the young, never being able to mimic the wealth and power of long-term accumulation, are inherently blocked out of the social order. Imagine what Earth would be like if leaders from the 1800s still controlled our world on Earth, right? There's a high chance that like slavery might still exist, ethnic minorities would have rights, women might not have suffrage. We clearly don't want this to happen and hinder the natural progression of our society, but it's a reality for a T proposition. But before I move on, I will take a POI.
Yeah, so if these issues, if the fact that like there's like the fact on your side of house individuals are afraid to die, i.e. they live in a resistance to death, what is the incentive for them to sacrifice themselves to fight for a change? So society never changes on your side.
What do you mean society doesn't change in our society? Like we told you, we have natural progression in our society because young people come up with new ideas and they want to tackle issues because they're the ones, you can't just switch races like on the other side of our house, right? If you're born African Americans, you have the incentive to continue to fight for African American rights and fight for structural discrimination because of the fact that you will always be affected by it, and because you want to make an impact in today's world with a limited time. You have the more urgency to work at it, become more involved in social justice as fast as you can, and help those in time so that your kids don't have to go through the same issues that maybe you have. This is the difference of the your side and the our side. Let me ask you a quick question. Let me ask you two crucial questions of today's debate. On practical, which side is able to provide a more equal and just society? Let me tell you, when people are able to live for so much longer and the population starts to rise at an uncontrollable rate, the standard of living for each person will go down along with it. To really prove why life is so much worse under team proposition, let me give you a quick propensity analysis to compare. Let's picture both worlds. On their side, instead of having 7 billion people on the planet, their population is going to be something like close to 15 billion people, and it's going to increase at a much faster rate. Old corporate leaders have power for centuries. Every decent job is cut out. No matter how hard you work, you can't get social economic mobility. And because natural resources like water is still limited no matter what, it's much harder to have access to basic needs for the majority of people. Even at their best case, majority of society will live under the poverty line and probably be suffering much worse than compared to our side. Whereas on the our side, even at our worst, where we still do admit that we have problems at Earth, we don't have all these new problems we just told you about, and people are more motivated to work and help society progress. Although socioeconomic disparity might exist, it's not even close to the severity of what will happen under T proposition. It's much more manageable on the our side. We obviously provide better life for individuals. On principle, which side are individuals happier? On the their side, individuals will no longer value the little things in life that make us happy in life, right? This is like individuals no longer feeling happy or appreciative of spending time with family and friends, as they no longer feel the gratitude of having the opportunity and the chance, right? Furthermore, you have less purpose in each of your day because, like we told you, why do you need to maximize the productivity of each of your day when you simply can do it for the next centuries? This is what unhappiness sounds like. Under our world in comparative, individuals value life. They value time, meaning they spend more time doing things that actually make them happy with the limited time they have, and do things that give them a sense of purpose because you don't have infinite time. Why OO wins today's debate then? We are the team that covered the impacts and the most important stakeholders in today's debate through valid mechanisms and comparative regarding the standard of life, society progress, impact on minorities, and overall why it's principally harmful to live forever. And for all these reasons, we are so proud to oppose.
We thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for that speech, and that wraps up the opening half of today's debate. To continue the closing half, we call upon the member for the government. Here.
Hey, am I audible and visible?
Yep, you are both.
Okay, great. I'm sorry. Okay. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. As closing government, we believe that only when we live in an alternate carbon universe, we're actually able to solve many of the problems that we're seeing today. This includes things like climate change, things like increasing crime, things like increasing poverty, things like that. We believe that our arguments are going to be the most unique, and I'm going to explain why that is and how it exactly clashes with the ops arguments. So going into our 3 main arguments, firstly, on why there's going to be less suffering and less crime in our world. Let me characterize you for why people commit crimes right now, right? We tell you this because first of all, they probably need to continue living and survive, and they only have so much time. People choose not to work hard because they think it's going to take too long and their time is finite. They're afraid that they're actually going to spend their whole life working, not be able to actually enjoy the fruits of their labor. For some of them, they think the worst thing that can happen to them is to die, so that they'll choose to do anything because they're going to die anyways. This looks like the screwed up people that want to take people that die with them. This looks like terrorists that want to make a political point, suicide bombers, things like that. So what happens when people will not die? There will be less crime and suffering. Why? Three layers. Firstly, because there's going to be no joy in killing anymore. The messed up sadists who kill people to see the suffering of people won't be compelled to do so because they understand that these people won't even die in the first place. They're just going to be reincarnated into another life. In the second instance, people who harm you will come back. And this is different from the openings point on eyewitness testimonies. And the mechanism coming from closing is much more effective because we tell you that even though in courts, there's still going to be the back and forth between the defendant and the accuser, right? Their punishment is not going to be certain, and it's not like it's going to be definite. This is still their word against my word. The unique mechanism that closing gives you as to why people will not kill anyone or harm anyone and cause them any harm is because the killer is more likely to be scared that the person will come back and try to kill them back, right? This is highly plausible because we tell you that human emotion and rage is hard to control. And as a rational being, beings that wants to seek revenge, the killer will know that there's always a person somewhere, and note the fact that they won't even be able to recognize who that is, seeing as they're in a different body that can take revenge on them. That's going to be a big incentive for them to not ever do these type of things anymore, because they're going to have to live a life, an infinite life, in which they know that the other person is probably going to try to kill them, right? And thirdly, we tell you that there's going to be no point in murdering for the intention of getting rid of these people and their knowledge of certain things, right? Two layers. Firstly, because we tell you that people who kill someone, because someone else knows something, people who kill them, people who kill other people because they know something that they don't want them to share, is not going to be able to kill them. Firstly, because this looks like political opponents to a supreme leader of a country, or something like that, and the leaders trying to kill the opponents or the dissidents or the whistleblowers that try to expose them for what they're doing. They're not going to be able to kill these people, knowing that they're ultimately going to come back and to expose whatever they're going to know and rise up again. What are the impacts of this, right? It's pretty simple, because firstly, we tell you that less people are going to get killed simply because of the current constraints of today, right? Murder rates are drastically decreased. There will be less suffering, less hate crimes, anything like that ultimately will lead to someone dying, right? We tell you that things like human trafficking, kidnapping will not happen as often, knowing that these victims if they were to choose to kill themselves, they would be out of their grasp, and knowing that their victims are likely to choose this, knowing that they're going to be reincarnated anyways, they're not going to do that in the first place. We're going to massively reduce things like human trafficking, kidnapping, whatever. We tell you that politically, there's also going to be more communication among people, because you can't just kill your political dissidents and the people challenging your political roles. There's a less possibility of an authoritarian state trying to mass power and just try to kill everyone that's that is going against them. Secondly, we tell you one of the biggest arguments coming from closing is that they're going to care more about the world that they're living in as opposed to now, right? We tell you that in the status quo right now, people are usually very narrow-minded, right? People living in the world right now only cares about the present, not preventing issues in the future. When people are going to be living in the future, even if in another body, they would have to care about what happens in the future. This looks like things like climate change, the limited resources of the planet, etc. There are urgent issues that have to be solved in the next decades, yet people in the status quo right now aren't taking actions because they don't think they're going to live to see that happen anyways. It's okay if the planet dies 50 years from now, because I'm not going to be alive 50 years from now, and therefore they're going to do whatever they want, burn fossil fuels or whatever, not care about the earth, right? In our world, we tell you that when you have to live in the future, you can't simply avoid these problems anymore. It's not like what Op talked about, how there's going to be stagnation and people are not going to care, because you're going to have to live in the present. They're going to have to do the things that it's going to make their lives better in the end, right? You don't want your houses to be wiped by the ocean, nor have little to no resources left with to actually sustain a happy life. Even if you're not going to live a happy life, that is a problem. So on our side of the house, people will actually care more about the world. They will want to campaign for things that combat climate change, the using of resources, natural resources. People will actually might want to help the poor because they don't want to pay for the welfare that's going to have the taxes that go into welfare more and more by the years, right? Because they know that they're going to have to do this and pay for this in the future. They also will care about things like nuclear warfare and developing things like that, because, well, you're going to have to live in a post-apocalyptic world, right? Even right now, some of the leaders are like, well, if I'm going to launch this bomb into another country, it's okay because everyone's going to die with me anyways. And at least it shows that we are as strong as a country. Some people are messed up like that. But in our world, they're not going to do that simply because they're going to have to live in the world after that as well. People are going to care about their decisions and actually care about the future and the issues that they're going to have to solve them in the end, right? And thirdly, we tell you that different from what opposition thinks about discrimination and racism and sexism, all that, we tell you that it's actually going to decrease on our side of the house, right? Why is that? As Op concedes, when in an alternative like our world, there's going to be not too much of an emphasis on our body, right? This means what we look like, I guess our skin color and our gender or whatever, right? And this is the key distinction here. They say that because of things like that, oh well, it doesn't matter because you're just going to kill yourself over and over again. We argue that in our world, there's actually going to be less racism because we'll now strengthen the idea that we're really only different in appearance and we're the same in mind. I can have the same consciousness, the same ideas, whatever, and appear in a Black woman's mind, and I can also do the same in a white man's mind. I don't think there's going to be racism or discrimination anymore, knowing that everyone is just like there should be valued by who they are as a person, and not simply because you think that this skin colored people is like different from you, right? When we understand that there's really no inherent difference between all of us, we're all the human race with similar consciousness, and that our body does not necessarily dictate everything like about me. This is the moment when we're actually able to solve discrimination, or at least reduce it massively, and say like, and be able to like reduce the impacts of racism, discrimination, or whatever, because we'll all know in the end that we are the same after all, and there's no difference that can divide us anymore. So proud to propose.
We thank the member for the government for that fine speech. To continue opposition of the House, we call upon the member for the opposition. Here.
I prefer my POIs verbally, and my preferred pronoun is she, her. Thank you. Okay, without further ado, my time starts now. As a leader of opposition, I will bring you 3 unique constructive to the closing opposition bench in my speech. Without further ado, first constructive being that an altered carbon universe would actually create societal disturbances, would actually create severe societal disturbances. The basic rationale behind is on religious belief. Specifically, when you look at all religion around the world, they share the basic similarity of believing in afterlife. For this looks like in Christianity, the individual Christian believe in heaven and hell. In Buddhism, individual believe in rebirth. In Hinduism, individual believe in like a path to ancestors or path of God. And in Islam, individual believe in heaven as indicated in the 6th article of faith. Those examples show you that it's inherent in religious belief that they want their soul to go through a passage to reach heaven, to reach the afterlife. This directly clashes with the ideologies of altered carbon universe. How so? Altered carbon universe means that your soul is captured in a disk. There is no way for your soul to go through a passage. There is no way for your soul to reach the afterlife, to reach heaven, to reach the eternal bliss. We argue this has 2 detrimental impacts. First impact being that it would actually trigger rooted revolts to leave rooted revolts led by the religious people to leave the altered carbon universe for 2 motivations. First motivation being on an individual level, they want to reach the eternal bliss. They want to reach heaven. So they obviously want to combat against altered carbon universe. Second motivation being they are fighting, they're conceptualizing they perceive themselves as fighting for entire humanity, as providing other ignorant individual a chance for a free autonomous soul, so that they also have a chance to go to heaven, to go to the afterlife. In this case, it shows you the revolts are going to be deeply rooted. The revolts there's no way to solve the revolts by rationality. There's no way to solve the revolts by negotiation. The revolts are going to happen either way. This is extremely detrimental. If we visualize this impact, it's a distinct example of Israel-Palestine impact, where you see that the religious impact are religious violence and wars are the most detrimental type of war violence there is, because it's extremely irrational, because it's insoluble, because of the result of violence and casualties it triggers. We tell you this is happening, this is going to happen in the government's role. Second layer of impact is being that when individuals believe in religious belief, that when they believe in afterlife, which is only present in the opposition's world, they have the moral intention, moral motivation to do good because they believe in karma. Because they believe when they actually do selfless actions, it's seen by the amazing God. Because they believe when they actually commit those kind selfless actions, they have a higher chance of going to heaven. When such belief disappears, we are seeing an extremely dark and tragic world, Judge. Because could you even imagine when an individual loses the motivation to actually do morally selfless actions, when an individual can no longer be completely disciplined when the individual loses an intention of being disciplined? This is extremely detrimental in the sense that they will create severe social disturbances because no one have no moral motivation anymore. The accumulated social disturbances in both impacted from a direct revolt and also from daily events of loss of belief in karma would result in a society that is completely disturbed. In such a society, humanity cannot be thriving anyway, as the government might want you to believe, Josh. This shows to you that government's benefits don't stand. Moving on to second argumentation, we tell you that we provide you with a unique new mechanism of how racial segregation grows more distinct in the world of altered carbon universe on the closing opposition bench. We tell you that even in the in the Prime Minister's speech, they modeled an altered carbon universe as an ideal open access. But when you consider it realistically, there's going to be differences in choosing which body you want to transfer to, and choosing like the sequencing, whether you choose first of whether you make the choice first. In both of these choices, if you have a higher societal power, if you are a white male, you're more likely to make these choices than a Black lesbian female. So we tell you in this case, when they make the when the white males are able to make the choice before the minority marginalized group, they're going to tend to choose a white male. Why? Because they see right now in the society the white male are receiving more social advantage in the job market, and in receiving governmental welfare, in receiving access to education, and receiving medical services. All those benefits unfortunately do exist in the society right now, which directly rebuts what the closing government is telling you, that appearances don't matter. Unfortunately, appearances do, because it's directly linked to the amount of social advantage you get. In this case, the individual white male who get the superiority in choosing will choose to stay as a white male. It further increases the segregation between racial majority and minority. This means that the good people are going to keep on, that the society's superior people is going to keep on living a good life. However, for the marginalized minorities, they're going to live in an even harder life. They're going to live in a life where there is even less social access, where there is even less access to education, to free medical services, which they desperately need. In this case, in the government world, they further worsens the situation in the sense that take away their last choice, their last straw to actually commit suicide, their last ability to choose to die. In this case, they're unable to do so because of the existence of the altered carbon universe. We believe such violation principally on human rights is unacceptable. Before I move on to a third constructive, I'd like to take POI from the open bench.
Yeah, okay. If you die on our side of your house, then presumably you get a new life. Isn't that a greater option? Would you hold the capacity to change things for the better?
Okay, we already told you when you say you have a possibility of getting a new life, if you are indeed a socially minority, if you are indeed a marginalized minority group, it is very unlikely you get to choose before the dominant majority group, right? The dominant majority group is going to choose before you, and they're going to have more choice in choosing which body they want to transfer their consciousness to. In this case, they're going to choose the ones with benefit, the ones that are white, that are male. Moving on to our third and last constructive of how, when the entire government bench only considers good, inspiring people living on. In this case, we like to judge to consider the evil people actually living on, the evil people actually leading a life that is infinite. In this case, three cases. First, being an authoritarian leader. This means that they could utilize their experiences of governing in the past to stay in constant power. This means that they're able to consistently torture their political opponents. This means they're able to consistently oppress their own people, exploit the entire workforce to the full extent. This means that the disparity in those authoritarian regime country is going to grow exponentially. Second example, of a most extreme example, is Hitler. Right? In this case, Hitler is going to live on forever, where he is going to push for racial supremacy. He is going to push for genocide. This a case outweighs the entire benefit of multiple people out of time, multiple people together. Third example is actually considering crime, where we tell you when the violent individual, for example, serial killers, they are not rational, right? They don't care if they get revenge. They don't care if the individual doesn't suffer enough. They're going to do killing either way. For those individuals, they live on forever, and this is obviously not a benefit. This is obviously a thing that both sides doesn't want to see. We tell you that the one or two exceptions in the side of the one or two evil people that lives on the side of the government world is able to inflict enough harm to outweigh all of the benefit the government bench has ever opposed to you. Never been prouder to oppose. Thank you.
We thank member of the opposition for that speech. To wrap up government side of the house, we call upon government whip. Here.
Am I audible?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Judge, we see CO come up here and tells you all these great and impactful arguments according to today's society. However, there's one core mechanism that the opposition is lacking, right? That is the link to all their impacts and their points and the arguments that they make, right? First off, in today's speech, I'm going to address each teams and their arguments and to point out why essentially our team is giving you the most impact and the most clear mechanism as how this altered carbon universe is going to work in humanity's favor. First off, let's look at what CO has put on today's debate table. Right? They come up with this argument about religious belief, right? How after there's no afterlife, there will be a lack of, for example, there will be rebellions, there will be, for example, objections to this kind of treatment, right? For two responses. First off, I think that the opposition, in their cases, they really need to look at, in today's motion, right? The motion clearly states that we live in an altered carbon universe. It's not people becoming immortal suddenly developing a technology for people to become immortal. It's a universe where everything from the beginning, there has been no death. People always respawn, they always come back. In a universe, there could be no concept of afterlife because people have never experienced death, right? Our opponents think that, oh, we're basically talking about the current status quo being implemented with a sort of like immortality pill or immortality cure. But it's a universe that we're talking about. So we're starting from zero. So an afterlife concept isn't even real, right? Judge, even if you don't take my argument on this, right, we think that there are points also has like very low impact in terms of like, even if there's no afterlife, there is still going to be belief of God. There's still going to be concepts of karma. There's still going to be concepts of morality, right? It does not disappear with, a lack of afterlife or a lack of death, right? So we simply don't believe that either way, it's possible it's related in today's topic, or also it does not have a lot of impact, right? Second of all, our opponents, closing opposition comes up here and tells you there will be a loss of intention of morals and karma. Okay, they think that people have no incentive to do moral things. And that in itself is also, a presumption, right? Not because that people are able to respawn. People will no longer have a sense of morals or karma, right? We still know that stealing other people's property is wrong. We still understand that we need to take responsibility of our lives. We still know that for example, disturbing people's daily life is a wrong and immoral thing to do, right? It's not because that a loss of afterlife in religion we lose karma, right? Non-religious people also understand the morals of today's society. Okay, quickly addressing their arguments on racism, right? Okay, they say that people would just choose to become whites, they would choose to become good looking. All right, okay. Even if, right, we take them at their best and everyone is, for example, a singular color, which is highly impossible, and people choose to become like most handsome or the most beautiful in their own perspective, that is not a generally accepted, there's no general definition of what's beauty and what's ugly, right? Okay, so take them at their best, right? It doesn't matter, right? In a universe where death and appearances can be changed over and over again, the body does not matter. You're able to mold your body. It's not which body is the best. It's simply that the body doesn't matter. Therefore, your body does not represent your mind, your thoughts, and who you are as a person, right? That's what racism is. It's judging people from their color of their skin, from their body. In this universe, the body is a very distractible or a very incoherent kind of like presence where it can always be changed. Therefore, it's no longer important, right? Okay, and fourth of all, addressing their arguments on evil people and authoritarian leaders. Okay, the quick response, right? First off, there's no link to why, for example, Hitler is just able to respawn and start calling all of his soldiers. Right? First off, because we think that imprisonment is still prevalent in today's society. We don't see why imprisoning, for example, Hitler forever is just simply a thing that we cannot do. Right? There are still deterrences. There's still the military. We're still able to lock people up. Right? That's just we're still able to take weapons and de-arm, for example, terrorists and opposing people, right? So we don't see there's simply no mechanism in their speech that proves to how this sort of concept is simply excluding current ways of determining prevailing criminals. Yeah, I'll take a POI.
Presumably, this universe didn't have this technology when the very first white and black citizen lived on Earth. So ideas like racism probably still exist. Would you then endorse constant suicide until you win the bioengineered body lottery?
A biological body, right, in itself, it's engineered by yourself. We've seen that framing come up from the very first speech of today, where opening government just straight up tells you that you can choose your color and your appearance. And okay, yeah, sure. Then if everyone is able to change their own appearances, racism wouldn't even be there in a universe. That's even better in our world, right? So we just don't see how, your POI is able to, debalance any of our points, right? Okay, now just quickly going through all of today's teams, right? We see that opening government does tell you a lot of impactful points. However, they do not give you the sort of mechanism that closing government is able to give you, right? Elaine tells you that, first of all, why innovation and more innovation and a savior for society and humans is able to happen, right? Because people now care about the future. They are now actively engaged in the future. Therefore, they're forced to be innovative, to concern the future, for example, in sort of like global warming, as well as, a lack of resources or overpopulation. And Judge, there's also the mechanism that, simply in our world, people no longer start from zero, right? They're able to respawn and they're able to take all their memory and the knowledge with them. So therefore, humanity will only progress at the double, triple, or quadruple the amount of development that we're able to endure, right? We think that this argument actually has no response whatsoever. So OO actually tells you that, oh, I don't think that gathering all the world's geniuses together is going to solve a problem. Okay, I do think that it will, right? People now currently has infinite amounts of time to study, right? While in our opponent's world, they have to start from zero when they, for example, reincarcerate or a new baby is born. They have to learn from zero. In our world, they take their memory and their knowledge, meaning that humanity is able to advance by far, far better the pace. And we're very likely to solve other problems if, the geniuses of today's world is given more time and more resources to discover some parts of today's world, right? So Judge, in conclusion, CG is the only team that's given you these two characterizations about how there's going to be more innovation and be able to save humanity from future unprevailing disasters. We're also the team that's able to give you actual mechanisms about how criminals and crime will decrease, because there's now no purpose of crime, and the impact of crime, even if there is very low, right? Not only are we able to reduce suffering, we're the only team that gives you a practical way of modeling today's debate. Thank you.
We thank the government for that fine speech. Now to wrap this debate up as a whole, we call upon the opposition whip. Here.
Allowable.
Loud and clear.
I would like to start off with the responses to closing government. The first thing they tell you is that there's less suffering. The first reason they give is that it's because there's no joy in killing. Judge, there is no joy in killing, but there is still joy in physical and mental torture. You can still imprison someone. You can still send electrical shocks through their brain in order to torture them forever. You can still cut someone from head to toe, and you can do that once and ever again to torture them physically, right? So this looks like, for example, in the Greek myth, how Prometheus had this eagle eating his organs every day. Like, this is exactly what is going to happen in their world. Crime still happens. You can still torture someone. The second reason they give is that people who harm you will come back for revenge, so you wouldn't harm them. Three responses. Firstly, you can still imprison that person without killing them. You can still imprison your political opponents and torture him every day. You don't need to worry about him coming back for revenge. But secondly, if CG really think that physical pain doesn't exist, I wouldn't be scared of someone murdering me, because death doesn't exist in their world, right? But more importantly and thirdly, not every single crime is rational. Not every people think that this person is going to take revenge on me so I don't commit this crime. Oftentimes crime is irrational, and therefore these people still commit this crime for various reasons. The second argument they bring is that people take action for climate change because people live long enough to be impacted, right? Two responses. Firstly, climate change doesn't matter in their world because OG literally said that you can go live on another planet, right? That means that the impact of climate change doesn't matter because your physical body doesn't matter in their world anymore. No one would care whether there'll be flooding because technically people can just go live on Mars. But secondly, even if they do want to solve climate change, what they will do is they'll just develop indestructible bodies to avoid the impact on them. I don't really see why climate change, why the environment matters on their side of the house if they think that all these physical pain and the physical world doesn't matter anymore. The third thing they say is that there's going to be less discrimination because you emphasize the concept that people can be different in body but same in mind, right? The mechanism behind discrimination is the connection connection between the body and mind. It is that even when you see a well-minded, colored individual, you still make an assumption about them. So their entire argument is relying on the premise that the body choice is random. However, in OG's own framing, they said that you can go try out the life of an LGBTQ individual. This means that people get to choose their own skin color. So this means that when people get to choose whose body they want to take next, right, that will be dependent on how much wealth they gain. This means that all the rich and wealthy people will be able to choose the skin color that will give them much more advantage, for example, when they're looking for employment or for social connections. Those will further enhance like the distinction between different social classes and further enhance the sort of racial segregation. This looks like, for example, in India, the caste system will be enhanced because like the people who are the fairer individuals will get all the opportunities on their side of the house, and you can easily judge someone from their skin color. That discrimination will be enhanced on their side of the house. Tim said that body doesn't matter, but no, it matters because you lead your life in that body, and you can't just like mold your body however you want it to be, right? The last thing they say is that in that universe, there's no death from the start. So like the religion doesn't exist, right? Two responses. Firstly, the implies that you are bioengineered. Like being engineered means that you first exist on Earth and then you engineer people into being in that universe. That literally means that like our entire framing still exists because like if you're engineered, that means that like the society on Earth would have developed before that universe developed, right? But secondly, our impacts are not dependent on death ever existing, right? When we talk about religion, when we talk about how there'll be revolts because people want to set their souls free, that is not dependent on the fact that death ever exists. As long as people can imagine death existing, I think that impact still works, right? Last thing they say is that you can imprison Hitler. Judge, you can't imprison Hitler in their world because Hitler would have been so powerful at that moment. The reason why Hitler get defeated is because his army are like dead, right? So if it is definitive at that moment that like everyone can access the technology, that Hitler can access the technology for his life to be taken on forever, I just really don't think that you can imprison Hitler to the extent like, of when he is in his realm of power, right? Now moving on to, I'll take it later. Now moving on to OG, right? Essentially, firstly, OG and CG both told you that there will be innovations. Look, all scientific innovations only occur because there's limited resources. The car is invented to speed up transportation. Medical care is invented to continue your life. Space technology is invented because the Earth environment is broken and we want to live on another planet, right? Innovation happens to make up for the limited capacity that human body can do. This means that when you are immortal, there'll be no innovations because like you wouldn't need a car because you can just walk somewhere, you know? Like this looks like endless procrastination for these scientists who could have invented stuff that makes our society far more productive. Then OG tells you that there'll be that you'll be able to stay with your loved ones. Like actually, look, if your husband dies and come back with a different body, I'm just not really sure whether you will still love him. But secondly, people don't value their time with their husband, with the loved ones anymore. Because for example, their children would just move away from their parent for 2,000 years and then hope that I can come back another day and spend more time with them. Like because time is endless, people will procrastinate and people wouldn't want to spend time with their families, with their loved ones on their side of the house. They then say that parents die when you're young and that's very bad. Judge, on their side of the house, the parents would just disappear and then come back as another person. I think that is just as bad. Next, they said that there wouldn't be regret. Look, regret is what gives life meaning. Like having regret means that you've died. When you die, means that there is something that you value about life. Martin Luther King's regret is that equality wasn't achieved, right? That means that he cares about equality. That is what makes his life so valuable. When you are immortal, there's nothing you care about. You're not going to say sorry. You're not going to say thank you because you can always do it some way later. I wouldn't be debating here because I can just like do that 5,000 years later. I don't think that argument stands, right? Now, next up, like opening opposition, right? Opening opposition, I think we outweigh them because the first thing they bring is that there will be more violence, while we uniquely tell you that violence become worse on their side of the house because firstly, the physical torture still exists. Like you can have political opponents that face eternal physical torture on their side of the house. But secondly, we tell you that mental torture, for example, through like sending electric shock in someone's mind exists even more on their side of the house. Like you'll get more crime and more violence and all of these will become much worse. But lastly, we bring you the substantive that you will not be able to suicide, right? I think that death is a basic human right because for these that are living in extreme pain, for these that are suffering from extreme eternal trauma and depression, you have turned to every other resort, but then death is the last resort that you can turn to. When you take away someone's right to death, you're taking away the method to escape from the pain and the agony that exists in their reality. This looks like, for example, a mentally ill person suffering from depression from thousands of years. He wants to end that depression like very desperately, but he wouldn't be able to do so because when he committed suicide, he'll just be changed into someone else's body. This looks like an employer exploiting the employees forever because they know that they can't die, right? I think that we're able to outweigh all always owning argument on how it increases the chance of violence on that. We're also able to outweigh them on social discrimination because they only told you that there's no incentive to push for social change. They think that it would stick like the status quo, right? Well, we're able to give you a unique material on how it will be worse than the status quo because it will enhance social class. Never been prouder.
We thank the opposition for that speech, and that ends the grand final round of AIDC 2022. So congratulations everyone for finishing a very interesting round. Please give me and my panel some time to deliberate. I think, is it possible to have a breakout room or should we move towards Discord?